When people heard Niccolò Paganini play the violin for the first time, many believed it was not humanly possible. Some thought he had made a deal with the devil. Others believed his violin was enchanted, because no one could understand how a human being could play with such speed, precision, and beauty. But the truth behind Paganini's playing was much more interesting. After reading more than 800 books and studying the practice habit of the best violinists in history, I started noticing the same patterns in how exceptional violinists think. Great violinists don't practice more, they learn differently. And the fascinating part is that Paganini is not the only one. So today I want to show you how the 10 greatest violinists actually learn the violin. So let's start with Paganini. I read lots of books about Paganini, but in the end the most interesting things is just reading his 24 caprices. Each caprice focuses really on one technical challenge. For example, the first variation is clearly just different arpeggio one after another. If we look at variation 3 instead, we are playing only octaves in double stops. Variation 4 is all about chromatic scale. Variation 6 adds scale of third and then scale of 10th. And if you look at every single caprice, you will see that they are based on one technical challenge. In other words, Paganini wasn't just writing music, he was really turning technical training into music. Because great violinists really understand that pieces are just combination of technical skills. So that means that instead of learning pieces first, they really focus on building the skills that make those pieces possible. So how to apply that? So you could do exactly the same that we do for our students in the Violinacademy. So in level 1, we will learn how to have a beautiful sound, playing exercises on open strings only. Then we'll do some very simple exercise for the left hand on only one single string, like. Later, we'll move on to more complex exercises like scale on one octave, scale of thirds, arpeggio, or string crossings. For example, in level 1, you could focus only on exercise on open strings with a beautiful sound. Then, by the second half of level 1, you could do only exercise on the D strings, like for example, one string scale that you can see here. And then going to exercises only on the G strings, then only on the E string, then mastering string crossing by the end of level 2, and then starting level 3 doing one octave exercises and later on exercises on all 4 strings. Because this will really allow you to play anything, but let us continue with Jascha Heifetz. He was the most famous violinist of the 20th century. Actually, till today, he's considered by most people the best violinist of history. With Paganini, but Paganini we have no recording of him. So even when he was just 16 years old, he was already playing in Carnegie Hall and recognized as the best violinist worldwide. And as he became more famous, he started relaxing, spending more time, for his hobbies. He starts having this big collection of cars, dating, and all those things. And a few years later, he read an article from a critic who was to one of his concerts and said that, unfortunately, Heifetz was becoming worse, that his best days were over, basically. And that was really a shock for Heifetz. And from this day, everything changed. He started again religiously practicing 3 hours of every kind of scales every single day. And here's a point to remember is that it doesn't matter how well you play. If you stop practicing those kind of basic exercises, every day your level will go down. And it doesn't mean you should practice 3 hours a day. What we recommend our students that work very well is to practice at least 15 minutes every day. And that's worked very well. And by the way, if you are an adult beginner and you would like to learn to play the violin beautifully, we are organizing a free violin masterclass. You can register for free with the link below this video. So the next one is Nathan Milstein. This violinist. He was one of the most famous violinists in the 20th century too. Interesting is actually not what I read from his biography, but mostly what I learned from his teacher. So his teacher was Peter Stoliarski, And I make a lot of research about Stoliarsky because he is by far, I think, the best violin teacher of history, but very unknown. And there is here really two things I want to point out. So the first one I read in the biography, Milstein said that Stoliarsky had all his students do triadic exercises, self-sig exercises, Kreutzer etude every day. And if you don't know those names, triadic and self-sig, that's basically very standardized systematic exercises to mastering the left hand and the bow, not some pieces. And Kreutzer, the etude, the same thing. But what I found even more interesting that Stoliarsky asked all his students from the very beginning to sing a lot. For Stoliarsky, the goal of playing the violin was to make the violin sing. And to achieve that goal, you needed to sing yourself what you wanted to play. And I know a lot of our students always say, I can't sing, I never learned how to sing. But the good news is that you don't need to know how to sing. You can just try it, could even close the mouth. You will see that just by singing your piece, when you play it then again on the violin, it will sound way better. Then number 4 is Hilary Hahn. She really plays violin beautifully. And something she really does differently than most people practicing is that she doesn't think as practice like mindless repetition. She really sees it like an observation. That means that she practices loudly and really listens to every teeny details. And then she experiments with different solutions until it really sounds like she wants. So perfect. And in parallel, something probably even more important, the goal is not just to have a perfect technique. For her, technique only counts when it really sounds musical. Because technique and musicality, that's one thing. And a mistake we see a lot is that most studio beginners, they focus too much on just practicing as much as possible. But what we saw when we asked our students like how much they practice and ask them to put it in their diary is that they practice enough. That's rarely the issue. What we really recommend is when you practice, just close your eyes. Because when you close your eyes, you really start feeling what you are doing. And then there is 3 steps that work very well. It's just play something and then try to change only one thing. It could be, for example, the contact point, where the bow is on the string, playing closer to the bridge. And then listen how it now sounds. So analyze the result. Is it better or is it worse? And then you repeat. And with every cycle of those 3 steps, playing something, listening, and feeling what you are doing, trying something, some little experiment, analyzing the result, you will each time play better. So now let's speak about David Oistrakh. He was a student of Stoliarsky too, and later on to Leopold Mozart. 2 of the best violin teachers of history. The same with Milstein, by the way. Here there is a very interesting story I read, that I really remember till this day. Is that one day, as Oistrakh was already a little bit older, and he was already one of the best violinists worldwide, basically, he was playing at a concert, and Stoliarsky, his old teacher, came to listen to it. And at the end of the concert, Stoliarsky go to Oistrakh and tell him, yeah, it was good, but it sounded like a recording. And that was not good. That was not a compliment for Stoliarsky. Because what it meant for him is that every time you play, it should sound like it was the first time. It should not sound like you repeated the same thing over and over again, and then every time you do it, it's the exact same thing. As a spectator, we should feel like you are just playing it like that for the first time. It should feel spontaneous. So next time when you play something, try to forget everything you learn, everything you practice, and just play it like it was the first time you read was not the first time you play this piece. Because very often we play the same piece over and over and over again, and then it starts becoming less and less interesting. So the next one is Itzhak Perlman, one of the great violinists of the 20th century. And what I really love with Itzhak Perlman, not only how we play, it's how we learn the violin with Galamian. Something very interesting that Galamian did was to give students a lot of variation for each exercise. Instead of playing the same exercise always the same way, we'll always combine them with multiple variations. Actually, let me show you. So this is his book, Principle of Violin Playing, first edition. Anyway, and here you have a quick overview of some variation. And basically, what the student will do, we can see too, there is some recorded masterclass of Garrett teaching. It's amazing to look at. Is that instead of just playing these standard scales the same boring way each time, they use different slurs, different bowings, playing sometimes piano, sometimes fortissimo, mix the rhythm, just do a lot of variations. And that's one of the most effective way to master the violin. That's why for every exercise I wrote for the Violinacademy, I really make sure, for example, to have different variation, because I really think it's super important. So the next one is David Garrett. So some people love him, some people hate him. It doesn't matter. He's a great violinist. He really mastered the violin. And something interesting with him too is that he's learned with the best teachers. Like, by the way, every single great violinist. And his teacher was Jascha Heifetz, really one of the best violin teacher, yeah. I make a lot of research about Jascha Heifetz, going through everything he ever said, every single masterclass, books. The one thing that's actually easy to find on the internet that I really love, it's a documentary where he teach Vadim Repin, a great violinist, when he was just a child. I directly understood by seeing that in the way he teach and the way the student learn was that Jascha Heifetz has those super high standards. And that's a key thing. When we practice, we should never be satisfied with anything that's not perfect. Really, we should be playing on when there is something like... Sometime I remember I saw a video on internet and someone was playing like that. For 3 minutes straight without pausing. That's not the way to practice. Instead, what you want to do is really take your time and make sure that every bow stroke sounds beautiful, that every note has the right intonation, and take your time. Repeat everything that's not perfect. That's very important. The next one is Maxim Vengerov. And I saw a lot of masterclasses of him, and what I really love is how he always speaks of using your imagination to think a story about the piece you are playing. That means that instead of just playing something like trying to play the right note and so on, we'll think like, yeah, it's someone singing for a woman, maybe, I don't know, okay? Someone singing, and then he feel a little bit sad, some melancholy, and he want to tell her how much he love her, you know, and he would really say this kind of story, you know, and then play it. And then it go even more love, maybe. But then it doesn't go like you wanted, you know? Okay, whatever, yeah? But that's the idea. Instead of just playing notes, really trying to find what are those notes telling. What do I want to tell with those notes? So the next one is a very famous violin pedagogue, Flesch. And, you know, he's very well known because he's the one who wrote the Das Kalen system, that's the name. That's probably some of the most used exercises to master the violin. And actually, at the beginning, when he wrote them, it was only like one page, basically. It was just a scale, arpeggio, those kind of things, and then he would give that to his students and tell them, play this in every tonality, and then do it with a lot of different variation. Bow variation, left hand variation, different rhythm, different dynamic, and so on. But then he saw that the students will always just play in C major without variation. And that's why he ended up writing this entire book where basically he wrote explicitly every single tonality and combined every single tonality with different variation, so that he could be sure that his student will always practice a different tonality with different variations. And that's why myself, when I wrote then the basic exercises for the Violinacademy, part of the Violin Pyramid Method, I really combined them with different variation and wrote every single tonality to make sure that you really use variations. And now let's go to last one, Leopold Mozart. He's famous mostly because he was a teacher from the greatest componist of history, Amadeus Mozart. But actually, he was a great violin pedagogue, and he wrote one of the first books about how to master the violin. It's called Gründliche Violinschule. Something crazy in this book, and this was like 250 years ago, that he described how people use already in his time some marker to show exactly where you should put the finger on the string. And then he said how bad it is and how it's a very bad technique and doesn't work. And what is funny is that now we see a lot of people having stickers all over the fingerboard. And surely it doesn't work. But because those are those new shiny plastic stickers, it looks like it's something new. But the truth is, it's not new. It's made already 250 years, maybe longer, that people try to use that to learn the violin, and all the great violin pedagogues didn't use it or said, like Mozart, that it didn't work. So here, what to remember is, nothing is new under the sun. And we should not follow too much like new trend or new shiny thing, thinking like it's all new, this works better. Actually, the violin is very old, and there was a lot of great violin teachers in history. How I see it, and that's how I developed the Violin Pyramid Method, is that the best way to master the violin is studying what the best violin teacher of history teach to their students, and then do the same. And that's why I would really advise you to learn the violin the same way the best violin teacher teach it, and not using plastic stickers on your fingerboard.